Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, Lynn and I have another guest, and I am so happy to introduce to you Janis Vogel. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here.
Can you tell us and the listeners a little bit about yourself and the amazing things that you do?
Yes, I would love to. I am a relationship coach and I help women pivot out of relationships. And usually that goes hand in hand with a lot of big transitions when it comes to divorce and career change and just all of the iteration that needs to happen when you're leaving a relationship, leaving a career, or trying to become the primary breadwinner, or all of those big things. And I also help people with co-parenting boundaries and parenting plans and walking through those really overwhelming times. And I had the pleasure of doing some of that work with you, Kristine, and I'm just so grateful to be here with you to reflect on our time together.
I love that. I call you my divorce doula because you made life seem possible
Mhm.
after coming out of a 20 plus year relationship, almost half of my life. It seemed really overwhelming, almost impossible. So I'm so grateful that you were able to just hold my hand through those first trembling months.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm so honored to have held that space for you. And it's just so amazing what you can do when you just have a landing space. And isn't that the space we want to create for our children? And we probably aren't in that place when we're in the midst of the turmoil of beginning the divorce process, this pulling apart of something that is no longer working, but is also the familiar thing. So it's just such an honor to be that space for my clients when they're in those beginning stages. Once you've decided and you're just like, oh, now there are like innumerable mountains still to climb. I've made the hardest decision of my life, and now I have to figure out everything alone. And that's the thing, you don't have to do it alone, right? There's so much
Mm.
stigma around things and so much shame, and it can make us want to hide and do it alone. And we have to find that support. And I'm just so proud of you for wanting that support, having the permission within yourself to need that support, and then making use of that space to have a place to have your full emotions, to explore the impossible.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this work. How did you get into this?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I have been a film editor and a film producer, like a high powered, high achieving professional, like climbing the ladder. And I decided to have a baby in 2018 and was like, okay, yeah, bing, bang, boom. You can have the baby, you put it in daycare, you go back to work, like everybody's doing it. It must be so easy. It must be so supported. So I had the reality sandwich of having a child in American society where it's like each person on their own, figuring out every single detail from what stroller to get to how to navigate daycare to how to have a childcare village. And I always heard it takes a village, but actually creating that village is something that a lot of people learn the hard way. A lot of parents learn the hard way. And there's an underground village of like grandparents and aunts and neighbors and friends who are raising children with us if we're so lucky to have that. And I was in New York City at the time. I had family to support me, but not in my immediate neighborhood. And I just didn't have that foundation built. So my own marriage took a big hit when we had a child. We were just in over our heads, and it revealed a lot of our childhood trauma. And it was this overwhelming time. And we struggled through it for a couple of years. I was so committed to keeping my family together, to having this vision, to hanging on to this vision of the nuclear family that I had dreamed of since I was a child. And I was a child of divorce myself. Like, my father had left when I was 3, my mother had remarried, and my stepfather is a beautiful person in my life, but I had this vision that I was going to make the right choice, quote unquote, and I was gonna find the right partner and have this nuclear family, and that vision really just had to shift, and it was really hard to let go of that. I'm thought I was breaking generational cycles of trauma by staying together, and I had to understand that, like, sometimes breaking cycles looks like making the same choice as your parents did, but in a different way. And just because my mother had gotten a divorce didn't mean that I was repeating cycles by getting a divorce as well. I had to understand that making the healthiest choice was going to be the hardest choice, but ultimately the chance that I needed to make actual peace in my life. So that is to say, I started learning so much about childhood development, childhood trauma, my own trauma, how to prevent my child's future trauma. And I just became very committed to my own healing journey and mental health. And I wanted to do mental health work full time. So I found that the fastest route to that was getting my coaching certification. So I'm a certified transformational life coach. And I started working with clients while I was still editing television shows and films. So I've been building this coaching business for a number of years now and just really enjoy how art meets life. I lived through my own divorce at the time and am now 3 years out and have this business where I help others go through that journey even more gracefully than I was able to.
I love that. So, would you say that it was a gradual process for you to realize that divorce was the answer? Or did you just wake up one day and, like, today's the day?
Yeah, that's the part that people just don't talk about is that how do you get from thinking about it to deciding? And that's not a linear path. Nothing about divorce is a linear path. It certainly was a process. It comes in as this dark shadow of a thought, ooh, I want to leave my relationship. It felt taboo to even think it. And I think it's so important for people to have compassion with themselves for thinking about it. You are not bad for thinking about ending your relationship. It's ultimately a beautiful choice. And it's also a beautiful choice to stay and work on it. So that's the question. We went to therapy. We went to our own individual therapists. We practiced these tools. And it's like, how much work is enough work? And ultimately, yeah, it was a process of deciding and then a process of having the hard conversation about that being on my mind. And it's not going to be like easy conversations, right? And giving ourselves permission to have those clunky, horrible conversations that lead to a lot of big emotions and coming back and leaving and coming back and working out ways to have those communications in healthy ways when you're maybe leaving a marriage where healthy communication is the problem. There's so many catch-22s in all of it, right? If you could have these meaningful, deep conversations in healthy ways with your partner, then maybe you could find the way. And that's the thing, is there's this desire to feel heard and seen and understood. And you're like, oh, if I just say it this way, they're going to understand. And if I just try this, and if we just use this tool that the therapist gave us, then we're going to find a way. And you might, and you just might, and you might not. And coming to those moments of acceptance, we took space, we separated, we came back together. We had renewed hope. We were like, okay, we built this contract actually, like a Google Doc contract that was like, here's how we go through the day to have the least chance of conflict. We were open to conflict. Relationships are challenging, but here's what we're going to do together and what we're not going to do together and how we're going to each get our needs met. That was a big shift in my relationship when it was, oh, we're both allowed to have needs. The one who has, quote unquote, a more traumatic childhood isn't going to be the one who has their needs met more. And that's sort of the failings of the two parent to adult family system without generations of support or neighborly support around you. It's like a house with two beams. It's challenging to have a stable relationship with two people on an island. And yeah, in many ways, we were on a literal island. And it was just, yeah, it's interesting to think about how much support a relationship needs to be supported in its ups and downs. Ultimately, it needed to end, and that final decision-making time was really challenging. But yeah, the decision was made, and I was relieved to have gone through that decision-making process. Waking up the next day being, oh, wow, now to figure all of this out, the gradual process of unweaving a life together. And we had been together for a number of years, but 20 years of woven fabric is a lot. And yeah, I would love to hear from you too if you're open to sharing that decision making process. When do you know?
Thank you for sharing. What's coming up for me is that it was very gradual and not even an option for me. I had married for life 21 years earlier. So I was looking at all the other solutions. Leaving or asking him to leave was not even on my radar. We were just going to fix this for the kids. So we did all the things that you mentioned. Individual therapy, me mostly, couples therapy. I signed up for all these workshops and self-healing, leadership, self-esteem, finding yourself. Like if there was a workshop and how to human, I signed up for it. I was going to solve this, thinking it was all me. At some point, you start to realize that it does feel like I'm doing most of that emotional work here. And I was also writing my book at the time, The Unconventional Addict. And I really got to know myself in that process. It took me 6 years, a lot of self-discovery and making connections between my upbringing and my marriage and the people that I surround myself with. And are they really helping me with my self-esteem? What is going on here? Like the rose-colored glasses just came off more and more. And I remember being in a couples therapy session and the therapist told me, or us, you get to decide who is in your foxhole. And I didn't understand what he was saying. What do you mean? I get to decide. And who is in my foxhole? Do I want them or him to be there? And it was seriously in that moment that I realized that maybe ending this marriage is what I'm supposed to do. And I think that the therapist was actually trying to, he had other intentions, but it was really eye-opening for me. But then there was so much that I had to work through just with my book, calling myself an unconventional addict. I couldn't say the word divorce. I called it separate or trial separation, the D word. Like I couldn't even say because there was so much shame around it. So much shame. Complete and utter failure. And me being like a recovering people pleaser and perfectionist and codependent, the facade means so much. Other esteem, what other people think of me, means way more than what I think of me. So I had to really work through that. And I felt that the universe just kept upping the volume and giving me more and more reasons to leave. And it was more like, how about now? And I'm like, there's still hope, that whole healing fantasy. we're just going to have to go back to therapy and we'll talk about this. And then something else happened. How about now? But I have to stay for the kids. Maybe they're getting older, maybe when they're in college. And then at one point, my child got put in a dangerous situation. And that's when I finally was like, no. And it's so interesting to look at it that way too, from a codependent lens, that I would do anything for my kids. And that's really when I was just like, nope, no, no
Mm.
more. This is it. And that was a year ago today.
So chilling. Thank you so much for sharing.
How about you, Lynn? What's coming up for you?
Yeah, this is great. I was doing the math when I was listening to you ladies, and I've been divorced for 15 years. And much of my experience was similar themes that you ladies have had. My process was when I was 7 years married, is when I decided to leave. And at the time, I had a 7-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old daughter. And today they're 23 and 18. So I, much like both of you, I was trying to make it work. I did all of the things, all the therapy, all of the seminars, all of the self help. I had just started with a coach and I was on my 2 free calls. I had one call. And then between the first call and the second call, I had basically a call from a woman who said, "Can you please have your husband stop calling me?" And I had such denial that at the time, I was putting my child to bed and I picked up the phone and this woman said this, and I was just like, "Do you know who my husband is?" And I knew that she knew my husband because I knew her. It was just the denial was so deep. And so I hung up the phone with her and proceeded to put my oldest daughter to bed. And then I thought, who am I going to call? At the time, I'm not going to say burn bridges, but it's like people stop listening after a while when you call them with the same problem. And I was like, okay, I've used up all my cards. Who am I going to call? And I said, oh, there's that coach guy. And I'll just call him and see if he answers. And he did. And that was the beginning of my coaching. Really, just I've been working with that gentleman ever since. So it's been like 15 plus years. He really helped me navigate that. And then my ex husband and I started working with him as a couple. And we did guidelines on how we would separate in the house and not impact the girls. And so we both set intentions and worked on this guideline document so that we could separate in the house, because at the time we lived in a 3-story little beach house. The girls were on the middle floor and he was on the bottom floor and I was on the top floor. And it was very important that each of us retained our dignity, that this wasn't about he was in the doghouse and in trouble. It really just opened my mind to beginning to create a life that was intentional based on my vision and values, and just a lot of truth telling and holding space and navigating pain, really, and discomfort, but in a way that everyone could show up and speak truth. And that was so new for me in a couple relationship. We stayed separated in the house for a full year. And for me, that was really critical because of my own DNA and how I'll just stay way longer than I need to and just beat a dead horse. And it took that full year to integrate that. At the end of the day, this is what I learned, that people don't stay together for one of 3 reasons. Either they're not a good fit in the first place, they're not willing to make the relationship a priority, or they're not willing to learn new skills. And at the end, my ex-husband and I, we just no longer were a good fit. And so we decided to divorce. And it definitely was initiated by me. It was really hard and way harder than I've been sober 27 years. It was way harder than getting sober. I would say that it's been one of the hardest things I've ever done in my entire life. Just the rebuilding from that financially, emotionally, physically, romantically, the toll. I'm not going to choose that word. It has come with a great cost, and both good and scary, and all of the things, the full gamut. Raising 2 daughters, starting a business, really just so that I could pay my bills is how I started my company, which then I kept that for 12 years and it ended up growing into something else, right? With my own purpose around that and everything. But I would say that, yeah, just yes to everything you ladies are saying. And it's not easy. He texted me yesterday and said, Happy Mother's Day, Lynn. He's been remarried for 10 years. And my heart was so full from that because I know he meant it. He doesn't do that every year. But he did it this year when we've got our 18-year-old daughter's over in France by herself and we're both terrified. He said, please let me know if our daughter makes it to such and such, wherever she is. And I said, oh, I will. This is so nerve-wracking. And being on the other side now and being able to have adult children and be autonomous is a tremendous gift. And our daughters have a relationship with him. They have a relationship with me. And we're rarely in the same room, but sometimes we are. And it's become a whole new thing. But yeah, 15 years on the other side. And you know what? I'm so grateful. I love their father, and I am so glad I'm not married to him. And I wish him all the happiness in the world. So that's where I am.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I love that we're all at such different stages in this process. And I hope and can feel that this conversation will be able to help meet so many people where they are right now. Because where I am, I feel like right now in the middle of the shit tunnel, as my friend called it, like getting out of Shawshank and just, I can't see the end. Like, it's so overwhelming. And then hearing you from the future, basically, oh, here I am 15 years ago, this thing happened. I know how amazing you are and how successful your business was and everything you're creating now. And same thing with you, Janis, just seeing how strong and courageous you are, and that it doesn't have to happen overnight, but if we just keep being courageous and keep taking one step and then the next, and then, yeah.
Yeah, I have tears in my eyes. It is so beautiful to hear your story, Lynn, and to hear your story, Kristine. And yes, it's so touching to be at these different places. I had a dark night of the soul 1 year out because I thought I would have a whole new, fresh start by even 6 months after the divorce. I just thought I was going to bounce back. Like the weight would just lift because every time we would have our separate space, I would feel this glimmer of energy come back to me. And so I thought, okay, I have that glimmer. So that'll be like times 10 when I'm like out of the relationship. And honestly, 1 year out, I was still in the shit tunnel. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have a good cry here in the shit tunnel. And I had to learn what a good cry was because I was so resistant to all those feelings. Like Lynn said, being resistant and in denial and not wanting to feel fear and not wanting to feel pain. And it's so hard to quote unquote sit in that discomfort. And I say quote unquote because there's so much emphasis placed on like sit in discomfort, and people think that they actually need to sit still and just writhe in the pain. And really, there's so many things you might need in that space of fear and pain, like another human being, like a coach, like calling the coach, like Lynn did, and working with me, like you did, Kristine. And it's such a beautiful reciprocal relationship for me to work with my clients too. And we need these intentional spaces. We need to move through our pain. We need to breathe through our pain, right? And all three of us have had that moment of, okay, I can fix this by doing my spiritual work. I can fix this by going to seminars and getting more therapists. I had 3 therapists by the end of my marriage and was signing up for this amazing program called the Wise Women's Council that I highly recommend and that I coach for as well. There's something to be said for finding and reaching out to all that support. That is great and beautiful, but also taking it upon ourselves to fix the marriage. And my partner did a lot of work. And one of the things that I also love that Lynn brought to the table is I am so grateful for my partner. I did not know it would be possible to harmoniously co-parent with someone that I had conflict with to the level that we did. And we saved our relationship by getting a divorce. We are not friends, but we love our child to the end of this earth and would do anything for her. And we are in daily communication. And some people won't be in daily communication, and some people won't be able to co parent this harmoniously. But I do want to say that I didn't think it was possible. And it is much better than I ever expected. And 3 years out, I do feel that radiance and that energy that I expected to feel much, much sooner. And yeah, just having that courage to go through it and know that the only way out is through, and have that radical honesty and find your values and find your purpose. That's one of the first things I love to do with my clients, other than like just meeting them where they're at and dealing with the immediate logistics or the immediate listening of whatever is happening. It's okay, let's remember who you are. Let's remember what your purpose is. And it was so beautiful to do that work with you, Kristine, and just see the sort of blooming petals one by one being like, oh yeah, I love this and I love to do this and I relax by doing this, and I can be a model to my children in showing them how to care for myself through this. So for anybody who's listening, who's like in the beginning of this, like, what's the first step? The first step might feel really counterintuitive because it's going to be like rest and take a moment for yourself and get some support and take it one step at a time. You do not need to figure out everything in your life in order to start taking care of yourself. Do that one little thing for yourself. Make that meal for yourself. Get that nourishment. So thank you both for what you shared. So beautiful.
I love that. That's such a great reminder because right after I asked him to move out, I would forget to do those basic human things. Like I love food and I would just not remember to eat. I would wake up at 3 in the morning and not being able to fall back asleep, just mind racing, trying to learn this new language of divorce. Like, how do you divide up a life that is so enmeshed? And we have 3 kids. Like, how do we put them in the center of this? How do I not push that nuclear detonator button because I got offended or angry? How can I take a breath in this and just learn, educate myself, reach out to people that have done this before, and just be okay? Also being okay, not being okay. But I wanted to comment too on one of the things you said there, to let yourself just feel, because that's, I think, has been one of the hardest things because I still had to function. So I think that if you grew up like I did, where emotions were not really allowed or talked about, often called being too sensitive. So having emotions, like going through this very big emotions, it almost feels like you're going to die if you just let yourself feel it all. And then knowing that you have to get up and parent and get the kids to school and take the dog out and maybe buy food, and how do you drive and how do you change tires? How do you get air in tires? Like all these things that you had also relied on somebody else to do. And then I would shame myself for not knowing how to take the car in for service.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all so new, and it all can make you want to just rewind back into the marital comfort and the familiar. Like, our nervous systems just are alert, this is unfamiliar, you are making a huge mistake. And to be that one person in your home who's, this is the right decision, this is going to be so painful for everyone involved, but this is the right decision, the fortitude it takes, it's an incredible feat to stand in your knowing that there's something better on the other side when no one around you who's involved can feel that yet. And having faith in that, it requires pure faith, complete faith that I was going to be able to get through this. We have gotten through it. We're part of the way through it. It's so beautiful to hear you talk about being 15 years out, because there's still shades of relationships shifting in these ways when we have kids and we're going to be in relationship with a person to some degree for those 18 years and then beyond that with like grandchildren. It's a really wild and a very interesting, heart stretching journey.
I can remember when we had to tell our 7-year-old daughter that we were splitting up. And I had my coach help me with some languaging. And my daughter was also going to the Waldorf school, which is such an amazing education philosophy. Her teacher had given me a way to tell a story about an oak tree and to help her in this process of telling her. But one of the things that my coach said was that we're one family with 2 households. And I just loved that so much. Even thinking about that right now just evokes emotion, because we still are one family with 2 households. Now we have 4 households because the girls have left the house. But I just love that, because there is a way, if you do care and you are intentional and you do want to hold the intention for navigating this unfortunate process with as much love as you can, which is for me just a lot of truth telling and honestly trying to take the high road every single time, which is exhausting. But that just sums it up. One family with 2 households. I just love that image.
Taking the high road. I love that. I feel like I use my meditation practice so much in this and journaling. So if I get triggered and just the pause and being okay, I might need to sleep on this. Like we talked about this earlier, Lynn, in a previous episode. Then running it through, is it necessary? Is it kind? But it's hard. So can you please share some tools that have worked for you? Janis, do you want to start?
Sure. Just to piggyback off of what you just said, that's one of the most important things we can do when we are prioritizing our children's safety and emotional well-being through this, and prioritizing our own emotional well-being through this. I no longer prioritize being understood, heard, or seen by this person, and building this harmonious co-parenting situation. And like Lynn said, in having 2 households in one family, like at first I needed a lot of space and I needed as little contact as possible. And for people out there who like, it's safer to have 0 contact and to use a parenting app and make sure that you have the distance you need. That's one of the things that I love to talk about with boundaries, is like boundaries are the distance from which we can love each other well. And in setting boundaries, the most important thing we can do is make them clear, make them brief. One of the tools that I give my clients for high conflict co-parenting is called BIF, and it's an acronym that means brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And it's just so important to have boundaries where it's not, the hardest part of setting a boundary is not the initial setting it, it's the repeating it. So having that short phrase that you can repeat to your co-parent and for yourself to ground into, really, that disengaging is so powerful. The detachment and the acceptance of, okay, I'm going to be misunderstood, and that is okay. I don't have to get on the same page with this person anymore. I have to use my external supports. So the other thing I'll say is, yeah, it's the shifting of the relationship is so interesting, because you've been with this person for 5 years, 2 years, 20 years, and they've been your brainstorming partner and you've had to run everything by them. And you are going to want to find ways to co-parent together and have a parenting plan that helps you set those boundaries as well. into like legal stone. Having that detachment and acceptance and knowledge that it's going to shift over time. This person is no longer your brainstorming partner. You make your decisions on your end. You bring your decision to the table. You find out the information about whether they're going to say yes or they're going to say no about this. And then you go back to your own separate table and figure out what you're going to do next. So it's this ability to go in and out of conversation and keep your side of the fence grounded and peaceful and calm. And that's going to require some really just uncomfortable sitting and being misunderstood or sitting in conflict that is challenging. But in the name of peace, you're going to, yeah, Lynn said, take the high road.
I love that. One thing that you told me early on was that he's no longer your person. And that really shifted something for me because, like you said, we would brainstorm, we would solve all these things together. If there was an issue, he would be my first call. And then you helped me see, so who can be your person now? And then just, if I didn't have a person, maybe you need to start getting out of your little circle and maybe you need to meet more people. And yeah. And maybe you can learn it yourself. Like, I was just laughing with a friend earlier today that ChatGPT and I were the best of friends. I had to ask, how do you tighten the hose to an outdoor faucet and what tool do I need? I seriously had to ask that. And because my go-to was like, I need to call my ex because he would always do this. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure I can figure it out. And of course, he took all the tools. So then I had to go on Amazon and invest in myself. And ta-da!
Yeah. I think we could talk for hours about all of the shades of what's needed to get through divorce, but it's those little things, those like things that they used to do and I'm going to have to do either by myself or figure out ways to ask help. And that getting over that, it takes a powerful person to end a relationship. And then it takes a vulnerability to ask for help. And so there again, catch 22 is like, you don't have to be so strong that you do everything, right? But you also have the capability to figure out some things. Like using a drill is not as wild as it seems. And the handy person that you hire might just be really lovely. So many shades to building the village you need to get through life in general.
Oh, I
And
love that. I feel like it's been such a healing journey for me as a codependent and people pleaser too. And really just understanding who I am and asking for help, like you said. And I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to know everything. And I can start from the very first step on the ladder. And I tell this to my kids all the time. No matter how high up a ladder you get, you can always climb down if it doesn't feel right anymore. There's no status or winner at the end of life because you stuck with it and didn't want to admit that you made a mistake or it wasn't good anymore.
that's so beautiful to show them that we can pivot, right? That we can change our minds. We have permission to change our minds. We have permission. Like Lynn said, sometimes relationships just shift at different times of life. So many of my clients are in their 40s and 50s, and most of them are women, and there's such giant changes at that time of life. And sometimes relationships just need to change. But divorce has opened my heart and expanded my ability to love. And it's so counterintuitive to the shame-based narratives that we hear about divorce as a failure. But I have won so much from my experience with it.
Of that. Same. Lynn, do you have any tools or recommendations that you want to share?
I was thinking about it. Support is the number one thing. Lots and lots of support in whatever ways that you can create that. My sister moved to my town just to help me through that time. I was trying to, represent myself, which ended up not working, but I was trying to save money and be resourceful. And so she came and helped me do that, and just friendships and 12-step groups and my coach, and ultimately my faith for sure. Just that constant contact with the God of my understanding. And like you said, the journaling. And I was so stressed. It was so stressful. Someone told me it's a marathon. You got to pace yourself. And that really helped me. Another person told me there's not going to be a Perry Mason interrogation. And that helped me. I remember having this fear that I was going to lose my children. And there was that was just completely unreasonable. There was no reason for any of that thinking. But your thinking really can become distorted because of stress and fear of the unknown. Just the acknowledgement of that. There's a huge grief component. When I was listening to you ladies talk about that was your person and that's who you called. And I just felt grief in my body when I was listening to you say that. That's such grief. That's a saying goodbye. And so finding ways to embrace the processing of grief. There's so much support out there, but just whatever it is, being resourceful to find ways to feel supported, I think is the number one thing that I would say.
Of that. And I also wanted to add to allow yourself to rest. Because I feel like now I am my own boss because I'm trying to start my own business and this new life. And I am the worst boss I have ever had. I do not give myself any vacation. I don't take weekends off even. So just be kind. Take a bath or take a little nap. But I also love yoga nidra. And the first sentences are always like, it's been said that 1 hour of yoga nidra is the same as 4 hours of deep sleep. And I'm like, sign me up.
Yeah, it's so true. The permission to slow down and not figure it out all at once. Getting your shit together. Actually, you need to let some things fall apart in order to rearrange your life. And it's a hard balance, but when you do have that support and you have people who've gone through it, no one goes into divorce knowing what they're doing. You hopefully don't do it more than once in life. I have been divorced twice, but I didn't have children the first time. And it's so important to have knowledgeable support so that you can actually do what you need to do most, which is rest, take care of your resilience and emotional health so you can be there for your kids. Show them a healthy way of coping with grief. Don't hide the grief, right? Like they will be grieving too in their own way, and they'll have that opportunity not to feel alone through it when you can show them healthy ways to do that and take care of yourself through it and have support in people who know what it has been like. So, yeah, I'm so glad that we can all shed light onto the divorce process and share this with people. Have that sense of, I don't know what I am doing. Because you should be feeling like you don't know what you're doing. It's okay.
Yeah. And I would also add, you just made me think of something that when I first separated and I had the girls, we actually moved out and moved into a house. And I noticed that I was snapping at my girls. And I observed myself doing that. And I went and got medication. I got on an antidepressant for a time. And so I just want to give permission for that. For if you need that, there is medication that can help you temporarily or more long term if you need some support in that way. So no shame.
No shame in anything.
That's right.
Thank you so much for this conversation today, ladies. And Janis, how can people find you if they want to work with you?
Yes, I am on Instagram at Janis Vogel, on LinkedIn, and my website is janisvogel.com. I can't wait for the next time. I feel like we have a treasure trove of information and tools to still discuss.
Thank you